Hey guys, it's Artemis here, joined by Sab with another episode of Chaotic Neutral presented by Motorola. And in this week's episode, we have a special guest joining us. So let me go ahead and give him a call. One sec. Let me see if I can get him on the phone. Yo. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, can you get on Discord? We're going to shoot an episode of Chaotic Neutral. All right. So now joining us this week, we have a very special guest, Andrew Barton, General Manager of all things LCS here at Evil Geniuses. Andrew, how's it going?
Hey everyone, Andrew Barton here. Good to see everyone.
Nice. Awesome. So, yeah, I know that this has been, 2 weeks, I think, since we've last presented to you guys. So a lot of stuff has happened in the LCS. We had the League of Upsets happen this past weekend, which was pretty exciting, I think, for every team that's not Evil Geniuses. But other than that, things around the LCS have been pretty crazy. So what have you guys been thinking about these past few weeks?
God, I feel like everything is on fire. Well, not on fire. Everything is insane. Like everything that people have expected from the first couple of weeks have, been turned upside down, and it's been really interesting to see. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going more or less, how we expected internally with our projections and whatnot. I think we imagined, going into Summer Split, it would definitely be C9 at the top of the table. But then as far as we were concerned, all of these teams are very close in skill level and power ranking and whatnot. So, for us, when we are thinking about, the roster going forward, everyone is very close. So I'm not too surprised by the results. I think like specifically this last week, I believe week 5 was a little wild. I think there were a lot of upsets for sure. But so far at what we're seeing from, a standing standpoint, everything is looking pretty on track, I would say.
What was like your favorite upset from week 5? Because there was a bunch. I know what mine is, but I'm curious to hear which one you guys like the most.
I mean, can you not bring up 100T versus C9? Like that was insane. I don't think people were expecting that at all coming into that game. And I think, with their new substitutions, it's been really exciting to see their success.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the one for me. Like I had a feeling that's the one we were going to talk about. But that is the one for me. I think Poom is a fine talent. I think 100 Thieves did a great job of finding him, and he's going to have a very successful career in the LCS. So fantastic pickup by them, and I'm looking forward to seeing his future growth and development. But even Contract stepped up this weekend in his return to the LCS. So 100 Thieves has a lot of good stuff going for them. They're a well-run organization, well-run team. So I think only things can look up for them from here.
Yeah, Contracts had himself a weekend. He played Nidalee in their game against FlyQuest, and then he played Olaf in their game against Cloud9, and both of those are like quintessential Contracts picks. Like back when you think of Contracts, like first breaking into LCS, he was playing these like carry junglers who had like fast clear speeds, and Nidalee and Olaf are like literally like S plus tier when it comes to like that kind of role. So I'd like to see the way that they empowered Contracts to do well. I think that on that roster, he might be their best player. And if they continue to find ways to empower him through draft, and if he continues performing at this level, I think they're a pretty dangerous team. They're like the easy answer for sure. I also like their win against Cloud9, but I think some other things that surprised me from this weekend were, outside of EG going 0-2, which was surprising, of course, FlyQuest also went 0-2 in week 5, and I thought that was interesting. They lost to 100 Thieves and Dignitas. And both of those teams previously had been they were like bottom 3 in the league, I think, before week 5, and FlyQuest was like a second place team. So I think that really threw all the analysts off, who are always just looking at who beats who and trying to like figure out strength of wins and stuff like this. But with their 0-2, I think definitely shook up the league, and it shows that there's definitely like a closing gap between what previously believed to be top teams and like bottom teams, which I think is pretty good for the league. And also I think Immortals and 100 Thieves sort of are showing that in season 10 in Summer Split, it's more about who's playing well as a team together than it is about who is the best individual talent. I think Immortals beating TSM pretty handedly was good for the league. I thought that they had the better draft, and I thought that they really executed at a high level as a team. And they didn't really have any individual carry in that game. Besides, I think Smithy definitely had himself a game on Graves. He was he had excellent early control the way he always does, and it was just a very typical Smithy game when you think of what it means to have Smithy as your jungler. But yeah, I think both Immortals and Cloud9 doing well, Immortals and 100 Thieves doing well, is actually very good for the league. So I was not including our own results. I was pretty excited about what we saw in week 5.
it's definitely really good for the league from our perspective specifically because we were shooting for worlds and whatnot. And so whenever you can have a lower ranked team take games off what we perceive as maybe worlds teams, there's a lot of value in that, and that is something we're always going to root for over here. So
Yeah, for sure. It feels good to go 0-2 and still find yourself tied for fourth place. Only I think 3 games back from the second seed, 2 or 3 games back. So still we're in a decent spot, and I think that a lot of good lessons were learned from us from the past weekend. Again, like I said, just the power of having a cohesive 5 I think is so important right now, and I think the results are demonstrating that. So I'm excited about what we have to bring to LCS this weekend without giving too much away.
yeah, for sure.
Totally.
I completely agree with you, especially when we talk about the team play element and how that is so important, specifically in season 10. What we're seeing from League of Legends as a whole going forward. I think being able to mesh within the game and take those short skirmishes in the early game and whatnot. There's a lot of value in that, and so having a team that synergizes on the Rift is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think, as the league progresses, teams are kind of coming into themselves and like really understanding like, hey, these are things that works and things that don't. So I guess what I want to ask you guys is that have your power rankings changed in the past couple of weeks?
Oh my god. I hate power rankings. I think power rankings is the most useless exercise. My power rankings, I guess they've changed a little bit because, only like the 2 biggest movers for me were 100 Thieves and Immortals. I didn't really consider FlyQuest to be one of the top teams in the league, despite everything, despite what like analysts and everyone else is saying. But I think 100 Thieves is looking really good. From what the public has seen and from like what we're seeing behind the scenes, I think 100 Thieves is pretty strong, and I think Immortals are also a really dangerous team. Like I know that in their loss against us, I thought they were playing excellently. I thought they were playing like a top 4 team, or like one of what the analysts perceive as top 4 teams, like including FlyQuest in that group. And then against TSM, they kind of really dismantled TSM. And like I said, they had like I think what I would consider to be a pretty winning draft. I didn't really think TSM had many options to win that game once the game started the way it did. It kind of like continued out in a very controlled manner, which is exactly what Immortals needed to do to win that game. So yeah, 100 Thieves, I think it has a question mark for me. I don't know exactly how strong they are, but I think they're a pretty damn good team. We'll see like what happens if they can figure out ways to draft around like their weaknesses in that roster. I think that they can be at least contesting with the top teams, that's for sure. I don't think they're gonna be like head and shoulders above anyone else, but they went dramatically up in my power rankings. Like I had them with their previous roster, I had them like the bottom of the league, probably like 9th or something, maybe 8th. Now, I'm not sure. I think that they're probably top 6, and we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. And similarly with Immortals, I think before this all this stuff happened, I thought Immortals was just dead in the water, and now they have some life. And I think that they could be again looking at like that top 6 range. And it's weird because everybody's going to make playoffs. Well, not everybody. I guess 2 teams won't make it, but I think right now the league is in like this really nebulous state where we're not really even sure who the strongest teams are. And like internally, I still think EG is one of the strongest teams in the league, but in addition to Cloud9, and I think Team Liquid, of course, is doing well for themselves as well. But I think that this week really shook things up, and now I don't think that anybody really knows where teams stand.
Yeah, I think for me and my power rankings, I really try to anchor on to my preseason rankings and kind of what I expected and my assumptions about different teams and try to stand by them. Obviously, those evolve as the season goes on, but I think thinking back to those original assumptions and what we thought and perceived is extremely important. So that's something I hold to myself. But like you said, I think a team like Immortals is a super interesting one. To me, this is a team that really has nothing to lose because they were already perceived as, like you said, somewhat of a dumpster fire, and they had no idea what's going on. And so now that they put in their actual LCS team, these guys have nothing to lose. No one expects anything out of them. And so that's a dangerous team when it comes down to it. And those are the teams to always be worried about.
What about you, Sab?
Definitely.
How are you feeling about your power rankings for the LCS?
I mean, as you said, I feel like in the LCS specifically, power rankings don't really matter. Things just change, every 2 weeks. So it's hard for me to say, but I definitely echo your sentiments. I think that like 100 Thieves and Immortals are getting stronger and stronger per day. And I think other teams are kind of like lacking that flavor. But it's so hard to tell. Like, did you expect C9 to lose to 100 Thieves this past weekend?
No, I mean, of course you don't. Of course you don't expect Cloud9 to lose, right? Like they're undefeated, or had been undefeated up until this point. They were the spring split champs, so you're not expecting them to lose. I wasn't necessarily surprised when I saw the 2 drafts and when I saw Contracts get out to an early lead. Immediately, I was like, oh, okay. As long as 100 Thieves is executing as a team, like they have really good chances to win this game. From a winning position, their draft is super easy to execute. It's like one of the most simplest drafts, I'd say, to execute with Camille Gallo, Olaf. Everything in that draft really clicks and works together. And when you're playing on the front foot, I think it's incredibly easy to snowball that game and like win just exactly the way they did. So once the game was a little bit underway, I was like, okay, 100 Thieves are probably going to win this game. But then it wasn't a surprise to me. It's also not a surprise that Cloud9 dropped a game. I think that can be expected for sure. I think it's really hard to go through an undefeated season. But the reason I don't like power rankings is because like there's such a disconnect between like what you see, the 2 games you see on the weekend, and like the 20 games that you see in practice in the week. And like I have a lot more data than like the average Joe when it comes to making an LCS power ranking. Like even like casters, analysts, like journalists, the people who are making power rankings, they see 2 games a week. It's nothing, right? So like I don't want to like rebuke or like go against their power rankings and use evidence that like other people aren't privy to, and also evidence that you shouldn't be leaking. So for me as a coach, like I think it's a really useless exercise, but I know the fans love it, but I just like I can't do it because I don't want to be talking about scrim results publicly.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I bring it up. As much as like for us, like power rankings don't really matter at the end. Like we just need to win games. Like the fans do eat it up, so we got to give them what they want, you know.
True. EG number 2, Cloud9 number 1, EG number 2. Yeah.
No, but I think you bring up a really good point. You know, we are behind the scenes. We are seeing at a minimum 20 games per week, and over time this is going to grow to like 200 games or something. And so that's compared to the 18 games we get to see on stage in a best of 1. Like, first off, a best of 1 format in a MOBA is just kind of absurd. And so, going off 2 best of 1s on a weekend after 20 games in a week, that's so rough for coaches, players, anyone. And so, like, while I do, feel bad about that, I don't know the right way to say it, but it's just not a good system. And unfortunately, like you said, we are privy to a lot more data, and we're seeing, how the team is growing, what is going on. And so, we have to take into account what's going on behind the scenes.
So Andrew, I want to ask, what would your ideal LCS schedule look like?
It must be best of 3s, without a doubt. And I'm going to discount viewership and all the business metrics behind it, but from a competitive standpoint, best of 3s are without a doubt the best way to have a competitive league in a MOBA. And so I do feel very strongly about that. And then, when you have to pull in the business stuff like viewership and all that, I'm definitely happy to entertain that. But purely from a competitive standpoint, best of 3s are 100% necessary. And why I think you can also bring it back in a way is because, back then game time was, averaging plus 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. And, now you're seeing Riot Games push average game time down, pick up the pace of the game and whatnot. And so, I do believe there is an opportunity to bring back a different format and, viewership can still be maintained.
I think even a best of 2s would be fine. Like, just don't give me freaking best of 1s. Like, but the best format is kind of like arguable. The worst format is inarguable, and it's best of 1s, right? So like, right now we have literally the worst format. It can't get any worse than best of 1 in a MOBA. I think you could use best of 2s with a point system. I think you could use best of 2s without a point system. I think either is fine. You could spread it across 4 days, which gives them additional days to sell their product. Like they're selling Friday Night League as like a standalone thing, or at least I think they tried to. So like if you want to like increase the number of days, which they did, like why are you just going to take games off of Saturday and Sunday? Like why not just like increase the number of games and actually stretch your product? Like honestly, like I don't have the data that they have, and like there's of course good arguments to be made against that, like Andrew was kind of alluding to, but at the same time, I think that there's room for improvement that we're probably never going to get. So don't hold your breath, everybody. I think we're stuck with best of 1s.
I think, even best of 2s is an improvement for sure. Best of 3 is like my ideal scenario, but like you said, you can spread it out across the weeks. I even think, you can go about some way of increasing the games in the regular season. Like if you think back to last year at Clutch, and I think this happened with FlyQuest again, but we played more games in playoffs than in regular season. And when you think about that, it just makes no sense. Like I can't even fathom it. I don't know what to say, but it's ridiculous.
Agreed.
Yeah. I totally agree as well. I think that especially during this time, I think Riot and LCS has the opportunity to pivot, right? So hopefully they're taking this in consideration. We don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but that maybe is an option. We don't know.
So I guess moving away from like week 5 LCS now, like what's sort of coming down the pipeline that you guys are looking forward to? Sab, what about you?
W's, please.
I'll do my best.
Please,
all right.
Please, some wins. No,
Yeah.
I'm, in the seriousness of it all. I know that we have a really strong roster here and a strong team, and I really hope that what we get to see in those darn best of ones. Out of all the games, only 2 matter, which is stupid. The success that and the hard work that our guys have been putting in. Like, I want to see those results come out. Obviously, I work here, but reality, like, I really just want to see all of us succeed. Like, I feel like we are a top contender. We need to go to Worlds, so that's just how I feel.
Same. Couldn't have said it better myself. I don't want to say anything else. I mean, that's and during the season, I'm very one-track minded, right? So I'm strictly focused on our own performance and the roster we have here and the roster we're building. So it's been a really fun week of practice so far. It's been a challenging week of practice, and looking forward to the weekend for sure. We play Team Liquid and Cloud9, which is a great opportunity for us. Both those teams are number 1 and number 2, only 1 loss and 2 losses, respectively. So I think, like, from the outside perspective, I think that they're both favored in these matchups against us. I think we're the underdog in both, which is definitely like a preferential position to be in. So we have a good opportunity this weekend to pick up some wins against teams that are above us and make some moves in the standings. So and even if we don't, we'll be exactly where I projected us at the beginning of the split, where I said after week 6, if you look at our schedule, it's very front loaded on like the second half of, in both halves of this split. We had like a front-loaded schedule where like a lot of our harder games are at the very beginning. So, even if this weekend doesn't go the way we want it to, we're going to be like in 5th or 6th place, like 4 or 5 games back with 3 weeks to go, which is like probably exactly where I would have projected us at the beginning of the split. So, I'm not going to say we're right where we want to be, but I think we're still comfortably in striking distance of where we want to finish. So, still confident that we're going to make it happen. What about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we've got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipeline. As always, we are continuing to, assess our talent and what is going on here at EG. I know we're constantly, doing scouting with Nasser. We're taking a look, at different players throughout the ecosystem. So that's been exciting. Perhaps down the line, we're going to be having an amateur team coming up. So that's going to be something super exciting that I hope that we can get launched eventually. And so, that is something that Nasser and I continuously work at and are doing our due diligence on. But even like you said, when we're in season, we are really laser focused on, these 9 weeks and what is going on. And so, for us this weekend, it's making sure, our guys are fully prepared for the tall task ahead of them, which is, going up against C9 and TL. Both teams we have is very strong. And, like you said, no matter the results of the weekend, the way I look at our schedule, and this is kind of my preference, is we have some weaker opponents coming up on the last few weeks, and that's going to allow us to scale up and get ready for playoffs and grow our perceived power ranking, I guess, however we want to call it. But I expect a lot of growth in these last 3 weeks from our guys, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, guys. Thanks for watching another episode of the Chaotic Neutral, brought to you by Motorola. I'm going to go keep playing with this Motorola Edge. I don't know if you guys, the Edge Plus, excuse me. I don't know if you guys have heard about this phone, but, the things I like about it is just the hardware inside. This thing is an absolute beast. As far as like specs and hardware in this phone, I don't think you can do any better. So I've been playing with this recently, liking it a lot, and yeah, maybe put some games on it and see what happens. But yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. As always, Sab, Andrew, it was a blast to have you guys on here, and hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks,
see ya.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.